Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one is entitled, "The Sun Goes Dark, Effects on the Earth." Now, in the previous article, Article 291, entitled "The Sun Disappears, Day Turns into Night," argued that an event which occurred in northern Russia on July 20th, 2018, in which day turned into night over a period of 3 hours, indicates that stellar core dust had entered the atmosphere and caused the local sun simulation to fail, and that the resulting darkness could only mean that the sun had been dark at the time, and that this is most likely happening on a regular basis, since we know that the sun has been going dark during the so-called SDO eclipse season since 2011, which is not an eclipse but the sun actually going dark. We can see this from the fact that the corona shrinks back as the darkness progresses across the face of the sun. And here's a photograph from the event in northern Russia in which day turned into night, and it stayed night for at least 2.5 hours. And that is really dark night, although there was this strange yellowish glow in the sky. And I explained all that in Article 291. Now here is the two images that I usually show as evidence that the sun is actually going dark. And this is on the first day of the eclipse season. And what we have then, if this was an eclipse, we would have, when the darkness reaches this position, we would have the Earth below the blue line. But the Earth, if the Earth is below the blue line, there's no way that the Earth can be covering this part of the corona. I mean, it's either covering it or not covering it. And if you compare what the corona looks like here, if the Earth is here, it would simply be covering the lower part of the sun. And so the corona would still be intact above the blue line, but yet there are parts that are missing. And it's clear, you can see from the edge that it's not even covered. This is the edge of the corona. That's why it looks darker purple. This is the edge of the corona. And it's obviously shrunk. And what it shows is that the light emission from this section of the sun decreases and shortens, and the corona shortens just before this section then goes dark in the next few seconds or few minutes. So this shows that the sun is actually progressively going dark. It is not being covered by the Earth as it would have been if this was an eclipse. The other thing that shows us that this is not eclipse is the fact that the cellular-like structures on the sun are also perfectly edged. They're always complete. It's as if they're either on or off. There are none of them that are partially covered by an object in front of them, by the Earth, eclipsing the sun. This is not, therefore, an eclipse. This is the sun going dark. Now, in fact, this was actually not the first time, what occurred in northern Russia, that the sun had gone dark, because on August 12, 2011, a city in Argentina experienced a similar phenomenon when at midday day turned into dark night. And here it was even reported by local television stations that the day suddenly turned into night. This occurred on August 12, 2011 in Argentina. So this probably meant that there was no simulator in place over Argentina at that time. And the sun suddenly turned dark for a few minutes, and so it was seen on the Earth. Nowadays it's not seen because we have the sun simulators in place. But if the sun is going dark on a daily basis and the sun is also much dimmer than before, why then has not the Earth become a frozen wasteland? Now, the reason why the Earth's atmosphere does not cool down as a result, not receiving radiation from the sun, during times when the sun is not illuminated, and as a result of the sun's light being so much dimmer than before, is because the Earth immediately starts emitting more radiation when the sun's radiation declines. So a concrete wall facing the afternoon sun will radiate heat once the sun goes down. In the same way, the Earth's crust will radiate a lot more heat once the sun stops irradiating it. This is because the Earth and the concrete wall change from light absorption to light emission once there is no more light to absorb. The stellar cores do exactly the same thing when approaching the sun, as demonstrated by the 2007 stellar core when it approached and then traversed the sun in 2007. And you may look at Article 183 entitled Stellar Cores Absorb Photons which Carry Gravitational Energy for more details on that. Now, this heat emitted by the Earth is not, however, just what it has absorbed from the sun, but heat that the Earth itself generates, because the Earth generates heat in its core and it flows outwards towards the surface. And once the sun is not illuminating the surface of the Earth, then much more of this heat will radiate outwards from the surface. So in addition, the Earth radiating a lot more heat as a result is the Earth is now radiating a lot more heat as a result of its interaction with the stellar cores. These objects draw energy from any solar system object that is still generating heat in its core and will cause this heat to flow out at a greatly increased rate through all its layers, thus heating up all that object's layers. And this is illustrated by this image where we have a hot object that will be a solar system object in connection with a cold object that would be a stellar core that is low on energy. And they establish a connection with the solar system object by drawing matter from it, and then heat flows from the solar system object outwards through all its layers through the matter connection to the stellar core. And this means that a large amount, much more heat radiates outwards from the core of the object out through all its layers, the outer core, the mantle, the crust in the case of the Earth, and the atmosphere, right through this connection to this object. And because there's energy in this connection, and there's a transfer of energy occurring and reactions occurring between the Earth's matter and the stellar core matter, there's radiation being emitted from this connection itself. And this will also heat up the Earth, or the Earth's atmosphere. However, the Earth's atmosphere should still experience some decline in temperature when the sun suddenly stops emitting light. And that's because there has not been enough time for the heat that starts being radiated out from the surface at a greater extent to have reached the whole atmosphere. But this effect is stopped because of the artificial greenhouse effect produced by the chemtrails in the upper atmosphere. So the sudden chill that we should get in the atmosphere is decreased by the fact that we have chemtrails in the atmosphere. The chemtrail particles reflect visible and short infrared wavelength radiation, but not other wavelengths. So they cause the atmosphere to look hazy and the objects outside it to appear dim, and that's difficult to see. And they also cause radiation emitted by the Earth's surface to be retained inside the Earth's atmosphere. And you may look at Article 223 entitled Chemtrails Increase Greenhouse Effect, indicating a weakening sun. And this is illustrated here. The greenhouse effect causes radiation emitted by the Earth, and it's not just what is absorbed by the sun, but also what it itself produces in its core. And this heat, this radiation is in the form of short wavelength infrared radiation, and this is reflected by the high reflectivity particles in the atmosphere. So these metallic microparticles injected into the atmosphere thus increase the greenhouse effect. The heat released by the Earth, as I say, is not just the heat absorbed from solar radiation. The Earth generates its own heat in its core through fission, like all other objects in the universe. And you may look at Article 192 entitled Neutron Stars and Fission as a star's internal energy source for more details. The fact that the sun may now not be illuminating the Earth most of the time, or that it may be doing so with very dim light, means that the sun can no longer drive the Earth's climate as it did before. Before, the Earth's equator would have been getting most of the radiation from the sun, and thus the greatest heat. And heat would then flow from the equator upwards and downwards toward the poles, thus creating wind patterns and ocean currents. Without the sun heating the equator much more than the poles, this would stop, and the poles would tend to warm up in relation to other regions. This means that the Earth's climate is most likely being driven by various artificial means, which cannot completely replace what the sun once did, resulting in climate chaos. The North Pole would be very likely to warm up first, as there is only ocean at the North Pole, whilst there is at the South Pole there is a land mass, there's Antarctica. Now the ocean would experience greatly increased heating due to lava mixing with ocean water as a result of all the volcanoes erupting at the bottom of the oceans as Earth's magma layer heats up and expands. And here you see a map showing how much hotter the Arctic was. This is from February 10th, 2017. And at that time, the Arctic was extremely hot, and you can see here was above average temperature difference for the Arctic then was 0.73 degrees C. You can see it's a huge difference compared with the rest of the planet. The rest of the planet was hotter than average, but not as much as the Arctic. And the Antarctic was also hotter than average, definitely hotter than both the northern and the southern hemispheres, but not as much as the Arctic. So this shows that the region around the North Pole heated up first. And you could see a few months later, this one is from October 10th, 2017. The Antarctic was now starting to catch up with the Arctic, but still not quite as hot on then. Definitely both regions much hotter than the rest of the planet, even though the whole planet, as you can see, is shown to be heating up. And but you would expect now that the sun is not driving the heating of the atmosphere. It's now being driven by heat radiated out from the crust, and the fact that the oceans would warm up first because of lava coming from the volcanoes on the ocean floor. But still, it's heat that's coming from the Earth, mainly, not heat coming from the sun. So you'd expect the poles to warm up and reach more of an equilibrium with the rest of the planet. Now, the reason why I didn't use one of the current images is because the current images and these come from climatereanalyzeit.org, which is run by the University of Maine. But since NOAA made themselves partners with them, and NOAA stands for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, all what these models were showing is just not there anymore. They're not showing this anymore. And this indicates that NOAA made sure that nothing abnormal now shows up in the models. It wouldn't do for the Earth's population to start realizing that there is actually something very wrong. Now, the sun going dark would make observing any of the planets or the moon from the surface of the Earth impossible, as these objects are only seen if there is light from the sun for them to reflect. This then requires that holographic projections of the moon and the planets be produced in the sky. And this seems to be the reason why the moon's features are so clear and sharp, when it is in the sky during the day, and why it may suddenly turn from a crescent moon to a full moon at night. It cannot be easy to project the whole sky so that it looks right from every point on the Earth's surface. So the holographic projection system keeps failing to reproduce the reality that only the real objects in the sky, illuminated by the real sun, can produce. And here we see a photograph of the moon in the sky, a plane in front of it. You can see how sharp, how clear it is. And this is in spite of the chemtrails in the upper atmosphere that stop us from seeing objects outside our atmosphere clearly. So this means that this moon has to be a holographic projection inside the atmosphere. And you may look at article 220 entitled Simulated Moon in the Sky. In conclusion, an event in which day turned into night in a northern part of Russia and another in Argentina, as well as the fact that the sun clearly goes dark during the so-called STO eclipse season, indicates that the sun is going dark on a regular basis, but the Earth is remaining warm because it generates heat and radiates more heat when the sun is not irradiating it, and because chemtrails increase the greenhouse effect. The decline in heating of the atmosphere by the sun should, however, lead to much warmer poles, which is what has been observed for years, and also lead to climate chaos. And here are the references. This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.